Good evening, everyone. I'm Susan Furman, the president of Teachers College, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to Education and the Next President, a debate between the education advisors to the two major presidential nominees. In addition to our live audience tonight, I want to extend greetings to those of you who are watching the webcast of this debate at home or in special gatherings, including many Teachers College alumni. We're absolutely delighted to be hosting this event here at Teachers College, the nation's oldest and largest graduate school of education, and particularly so at the culmination of a campaign which, in our estimation, has focused too little on the subject of education. It's our belief that, viewed in the longer term, education is not only critically important in its own right, but also central to addressing economic challenges, national security, global relationships, the environment, and virtually every other major issue on the table. That's a view rooted in the thinking of perhaps the most iconic figure in the college's history, John Dewey, who argued that education is not merely something that occurs in classrooms, but is instead the stuff of daily life imparted in homes, streets, churches, communities, and the world at large. No one is more familiar with the challenges of education or the challenges we face in the future than our two speakers tonight. Lisa Graham Keegan, education advisor to Republican presidential nominee John McCain, served as Arizona's chief education officer, superintendent of public instruction from 1994 through 2001. In that role, and during her 2 terms in Arizona's House of Representatives, she advocated for rigorous academic standards, annual testing, stronger accountability, and school choice. She made Arizona a leader in creating new charter schools, and she also led enactment of Arizona's school tuition organization tax credit bill, the nation's first measure to create a tax-exempt source of funding for scholarships at private schools or enrichment programs at publicly funded schools. Ms. Keegan has also served as Chief Executive Officer of the Education Leaders Council, a nonprofit education reform organization that she and other chief state school officers founded in 1995. She was a member of Governor Jeb Bush's restructuring team for the Florida Department of Education and also of California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger's education policy transition team. Ms. Keegan writes frequently for the Hoover Institute, the Manhattan Institute, and the Pioneer Institute. At the 2008 National Republican Convention, Ms. Keegan was a vice chairman of the Republican Party Platform Committee and instrumental in the development of policy statements on education and Northern Ireland relations. She was a primetime speaker at the convention as well on education and disaster relief issues. Prior to her current position as Charles E. Ducommun Professor of Education at Stanford University, Linda Darling-Hammond, education advisor to presidential nominee Barack Obama, was the William F. Russell Professor of Education here at Teachers College and co-director of the National Center for Restructuring Education, Schools, and Teaching. At Stanford, Dr. Darling-Hammond has launched the Stanford Educational Leadership Institute and the School Redesign Network and has served as faculty sponsor for the Stanford Teacher Education Program. From 1994 to 2001, Dr. Darling-Hammond served as the executive director of the National Commission on Teaching and America's Future, which produced What Matters Most, Teaching for America's Future, a landmark report that led to sweeping policy changes affecting teaching and teacher education. She is a board member of the National Academy of Education and former president of the American Educational Research Association. She has authored, co-authored, and edited many publications, including Preparing Teachers for a Changing World, What Teachers Should Learn and Be Able to Do, which won the Pomeroy Award from the American Association of Colleges for Teacher Education. Teaching as the Learning Profession, a Handbook of Policy and Practice, which received the National Staff Development Council's Outstanding Book Award for 2000, and The Right to Learn, a Blueprint for Schools That Work, recipient of the American Educational Research Association's Outstanding Book Award for 1998. Welcome, Lisa and Linda.
Thank you.
The format for tonight's debate is as follows. I will ask each of our speakers a number of questions on topics ranging from the role of the federal government in education to the issues involved in ensuring that all students have access to quality teachers. We will spend 45 minutes on that back and forth. And I ask each debater to keep her responses to 2 minutes so we can cover as much important ground as possible. We'll show a little sign to let you know when 2 minutes has approached. I will then ask each speaker to put a question of her own to her opponent. Finally, we'll take written questions from the audience. To submit a question, as you were told, you must write it legibly on the colored card that was given to you when you entered the auditorium, and you must include your name and other information specified by the card. No anonymous questions will be asked. The cards will be collected midway through the debate by our ushers. I debated about the order in which I would ask the first question. I thought, should I do it alphabetically by Linda and Lisa? Should I do it alphabetically by Darling-Hammond and Graham Keegan, which is the same as Linda and Lisa? Should I do it by McCain and Obama, which is the opposite? But we decided instead to flip a coin. The first question is a question that each of our debaters has proposed herself, and Linda Darling-Hammond gets the first question. Your opening question is, how would Barack Obama differ from John McCain as an education president?
Well, first let me say thanks to you, Susan, and to Teachers College for hosting this event, and to say hello to my friends on the faculty and student body here. A special shout out to Maxine Green and Tom Sobel, who are really the heart and soul of this place and represent it. I want to start by just making the point that Barack Obama will be a strong education president. And I think that would be in contrast to Senator McCain. He has put enormous priority on education. He has developed a detailed plan a year ago. He's talked about it in 12 speeches, and in all 3 debates, he's made the point that when we have to think about how to move forward in this country, one of the things we must do is invest in education, because in this knowledge-based society and world, we really don't have any choice but to ensure that our kids are very well prepared for a time when most jobs now that pay well require college or beyond. He comes at this both from his own personal experience, because of the importance that education had in his own life, but also from an analytic perspective, that is, understanding that while other countries are pulling ahead of us, mostly because we are running in place, that, does that mean 1 minute? I just have to understand what the signals are, okay. That they've been doing certain kinds of things very intensely over the last few years. They have been investing in early childhood education and healthcare for all their children. They have been making enormous investments in the quality of teachers and teaching in very systematic ways so that all kids have access to teachers who are very well prepared. They have developed curriculum and assessments that are directly pointed at 21st century skills, and that means the ability to learn, to think, to problem solve, and they are sending a growing share of their kids to college. And so we have fallen to 35th in the world in math, to 15th in terms of college access, and we're at a graduation rate that has been stagnant for 40 years, and others are pulling ahead, and that's costing us in many, many ways, in our economy, in our national security. Obama has proposed strategic investments in all of those areas. He's already begun to take the reins in legislation in the Congress. And he is committed to making this a strong priority in his campaign. In a word, because my time is up, McCain has typically voted against most of these investments in the Congress and has only brought up education in the last few minutes of the last debate when asked. It's not a high priority based on all the evidence to date.
Well, Lisa, you can choose to respond to that, but you also, the question you posed that you wanted to be asked is that Senator McCain has aligned himself with the efforts of New York City Chancellor Joel Klein and the Reverend Al Sharpton and their Education Equality Project. What about that effort is compelling?
And I appreciate that, and thank you guys very much for having me here. And I will say it probably won't feel like any other McCain debate or McCain sort of rally, but it's awfully nice to be able to come and present what he actually does believe. I think it's very important. Senator McCain takes education very seriously. Senator McCain was part of a major push in 1994 with Arizona's Chicanos por la Causa, the Hispanic Community Forum, who put forth our public charter school idea. We were the first in the nation to have a state board for charter schools. The reason to have done it was that we put on that board a requirement that it was a majority-minority board because it was so difficult for minority leadership to have a say in what was going on in some of their schools. So he has been there and done the work. The reason he finds Joel Klein and Reverend Sharpton's Education Equality Project so compelling, and if you haven't taken a look at it, I would encourage you to, is because it gets beyond Republican-Democrat politics. It gets beyond wherever it is right now that is preventing us from making the critical and urgent improvements in two major areas. One, the quality of teachers in high-need schools, and secondly, in the number of choices parents have for their kids. Linda talked about Senator Obama. Senator Obama's mother chose to find a scholarship so he could go to a private school. That was her choice. Lots of parents are assigned to schools that will not work for their kids. And we have to take that extremely seriously. So whatever the convergence is between Reverend Sharpton, Joel Klein, Newt Gingrich, and Roy Romer, there is a very narrow strip of agreement there that we have got to get together, because all of those gentlemen have joined on to this project. Senator Obama has not chosen to sign on to this project. Senator McCain feels like that is the most illustrative effort of where he thinks we have to go next.
Thank you. For the first question that I'm going to pose, I'd like to get a sense of the importance of education to each of your candidates. Sometimes education advisors work through the domestic policy advisor. Sometimes they have direct access. Do you each get FaceTime with your candidate? And if so, how much? And do you think that the candidates have talked enough about education during the campaign? We'll start with you, Lisa.
Well, I've known Senator McCain for 22 years, so it was very difficult not to have FaceTime with him. When I decided to run for state school chief in Arizona, I was the first person to run for that office as a full-out supporter for public charter schools choice. At that time, 1994 in Arizona, public school choice was sort of a bellwether event, and so I was seen as something of a risky proposition. I also decided to run when there was already a Republican in the race. I decided late, after we passed a lot of reforms, and having control issues, I decided then to run for state school superintendent to implement those. And I got a call from Senator McCain, who said, "Do you have a campaign chairman yet?" I said, "I do not." He said, "Now you do. Don't lose." He has been a great mentor, a great supporter of the kinds of changes that we wanted to make in Arizona. We did have the first tuition tax credit, not just for private school access, but for public support of every public school. And parents every December get inundated, I'm happy to say, with requests from public schools and private schools to donate to them. Senator McCain also very fully supportive of that effort in Arizona when it happened. So he has been willing to go places where other people aren't willing to go, as he did in immigration, and that's the reason you'll find a lot of the Hispanic community strongly supportive of Senator McCain, particularly if they know him from Arizona. He has listened to our Hispanic community about what was necessary for their kids not to end up in dead-end environments. He's been a constant supporter. You can always rely on a phone call from Senator McCain if something goes wrong in education on the front page of the paper, and the question will be, is this your fault? And the next thing he says is, what do you need? Is there anything we can do to help you get this done? He is a constant presence in the lives of those of us who are trying to get this done.
Thank you. Linda?
Well, one of the things about Barack Obama's priority on education that has kind of surfaced over and over again is that in these recent debates and in these very, very troubling financial crisis times, he's been asked, well, what would you not spend money on in order to manage this financial crisis? And he's said over and over again, I'll tell you what I won't cut. I won't cut the budget for early childhood education, because it's the investments that we're going to make in children that are going to close the achievement gap before they get to school and enable them to have a level playing field when they start. When Senator McCain went to the NAACP convention last summer, he promised to fully fund Head Start. But he's voted against it at least 4 times in the last decade, and his plan would actually cut $3 billion out of Head Start in order to both freeze the budget and make the $300 billion in tax cuts that are on the table. So I think part of the question of priority is that your money has to be where your mouth is with respect to how you're actually going to transform the inequalities that exist in our public education system and make the kind of investments that are necessary to move us forward. Because for every dollar we invest in preschool, we're going to reap $7 to $10 in returns to the education system in less school failure, higher wages, and so on. He kind of acts on that deep sense of priority in many, many ways, and legislatively in terms of the way in which he continually prioritizes it in the bully pulpit, if you will. And so his many education advisors, and I will say there are a number of education advisors in the Obama campaign in contrast to McCain. Both.
There's a lot of us.
There's a whole. Well, you're certainly.
I'm a mouthpiece.
Yeah, definitely. Get a lot of direct feedback from him about what he cares about what he wants to do. His plans are really his plans. Many people have noted that a very big portion of his agenda is an agenda to create a profession of teaching, to invest in recruiting, improving preparation, ensuring mentoring, ensuring professional development, ensuring that there is a career advancement system and ladder for teachers. And that comes from his own personal belief that he stated many times to many of his advisors that teachers are the single most important element.
Well, we'll move on to teachers a little bit later, but let me press you. Do you think there's been enough conversation about education in this campaign?
I think in fairness to both gentlemen, they have mentioned it a lot. And Linda, you're wrong that Senator McCain hasn't brought it up except at the last debate. You know that. Senator McCain gave a major speech at the Urban League, at the NAACP, at La Raza. He did a whole tour in Mississippi, and he's spoken constantly about education. I've read the speeches that Senator Obama has given, and I'm always fascinated that for both gentlemen, the day after they give these really major announcements, it falls flat. Other than Ed Week, and places that are internal to those of us who are doing education, you don't read much about what they're saying, and it just doesn't have a second life. So I think as a public, we kind of have to put part of that on us, part of that on the press that's not following through with it. You'll notice if anything gets attention, it gets magnified, and it's kind of unfortunate because then it turns these campaigns into emphasis on things that probably most of the public would rather we weren't spending a lot of time on. But I think you have to be fair to both of the candidates that they have put it out there and continue to, as it's important. But it doesn't have much of a resonance with the press, I think.
Do you agree, Linda?
Yeah, I think that and we should thank Ed Week for sponsoring the webcast that's going on now, because that's part of what allows us to have a conversation about education. And it is certainly frustrating. Obama's given a dozen major speeches on this topic. It isn't picked up, as Lisa says. And so I think that the media in general are not, understanding how important education is to the future of this country. I mean, I think that we've been through an era where, really for a number of years, education has been second, third, fourth, fifth place in the order of priorities. And that's why I think it's so important to have a president for whom this will be a major agenda, because if we don't make the investments that we need to make, our economy will continue to suffer. Our national security will suffer. We won't be able to pay for Social Security if we don't have people making good wages and paying good taxes. And the public has got to be able to be led by somebody who understands this, who understands that the investments that we make in every child reap benefit for every single American.
Thank you. As you both know, a number of studies have cast doubt on whether NCLB will achieve its intended goals. That's no child left behind. I'm sorry for that. acronym. One study published this month in Science magazine concludes that nearly all California elementary schools will fail to meet the 2014 goal of all students reaching proficiency. Another study found a 56% increase from one year to the next in the number of schools in the most serious category of remediation. A third study said that the states with the schools most needing improvement were the most overwhelmed and lacking in capacity to help turn these schools around. Why do you think we're facing these shortcomings, and what changes would your candidate make in NCLB when it comes up for reauthorization next year? Start with you, Linda.
Well, let me start by saying that Senator Obama believes in the goals of the law, the idea of closing the achievement gap, ensuring that all kids have access to well-qualified teachers, having methods of accountability that allow us to see how schools are doing and to have that data reported is very important. At the same time, he acknowledges that there are many, many problems with the law and how it's been implemented. They need to be fixed. He has made proposals both about the way in which the accountability metric works for No Child Left Behind, which is a kind of complex topic, but we need to be moving towards looking at the continuous progress that students and schools make. We need to be able to look at value added, that is how much growth do children make in the system, how are schools moving ahead in that way. We need to be able to look at measures that, in addition to the kinds of standardized tests we currently have, evaluate 21st century skills. If you look at other countries, their assessments include relatively few multiple choice items, and in some cases none. Their essay examinations, their oral examinations, kids are doing science inquiries, they're doing research papers, they're doing technology products. Those are part of the examination system. They're part of the accountability system in countries that are top ranked in the world: Finland, Sweden, Hong Kong, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand. So we also have to move ahead the kind of assessments that we're putting in our schools and looking at if we want the schools to be teaching in the ways that we hope that they will. And finally, the law needs to be organized around investing in school improvement in strategic and useful ways rather than simply trying to flog schools into excellence with a set of sanctions and punishments.
Thank you. Lisa?
Well, Senator McCain is a strong supporter of the aspiration of No Child Left Behind as well. And where he's absolutely adamant is that state standards and the assessments for kids that are in place have got to stay in place. He would change the way that we judge the quality of the school's work by changing it to a value-added formula for adequate yearly progress. The problem with backing off of assessments and turning them into sort of portfolios or things that are more subjective is that we can't compare kids. And today on NPR, Melody Barnes for Senator Obama said that we should get away from bubble-in tests and we should get to portfolios and things where kids can demonstrate. That's where we were before we had accountability, because in low-income areas, kids come home with an A on a paper for work that would get a C in a high-wealth area. So whatever the audit is, whatever it looks like, and it can be far more engaging than this derisive sort of bubble-in idea that you have just a really goofy question. You can have fabulous formative portfolios and everything in the instructional process, and at the end of the day have a great question that you answer by filling something in, but the question can be compelling. The point is that Senator McCain's belief is that one of the strongest features of No Child Left Behind that we did not have in place before was the ability to know how every school is doing. You can go out right now and you go to greatschools.net, you go to your state Department of Ed, you go to a number of places, School Matters, you can see how your school is doing, at least in part. It doesn't tell you everything you'd want to know about a school. You have to have a good fit. You have to have a good social fit. You have to have a good spiritual fit or a good mission match. But surely it tells you how that school is doing. And nobody has been more supportive of this than the civil rights community. A few months ago, we had somebody try to do away with No Child Left Behind in the Congress. Strongest reaction from America's civil rights community, because we did not know what we know now.
I saw that you wanted to respond.
Yeah, I do, because that's not actually what Melody Barnes said. She said that in addition to standardized tests, we need to look at other kinds of assessments. She did mention portfolios. They're used in the charter school that she's on the board of. But in other countries, and we really have to get knowledgeable about what does go on in other countries. If you look at the GCSE exams in Britain, the A-level exams, if you look at these examination systems that we often talk about and hold up, they routinely use open-ended and essay questions. They routinely include elements like research products. They're scored in consistent and reliable and valid ways. They produce evidence that can be factored into reported data. They produce numerical scores, just like international baccalaureate examinations do, which have these elements that are both products that are in the classroom and that have open-ended exams, just like certain advanced placement tests do. We've been stuck in a 1950s conception of standardized testing, which has gotten more entrenched in the last few years because of the requirement for every year, every child testing, which has costs associated to it. But what we haven't thought about in our policy system is how to undertake the kind of assessment that, again, is commonplace in all of the highest achieving countries in the world, completely scoreable consistently. They use moderation, they use auditing, just like the New York State Regents exams, which also includes some questions like that. And what they're doing as a result is they're teaching higher order thinking skills routinely. They're getting greater equity in the curriculum for students in all kinds of schools, because rather than some kids bubbling in all day and other kids doing this kind of rich kind of curriculum work, it happens in schools across the system.
If we've got schools who are bubbling in all day, Linda, those are just lousy schools. I'm sorry, but I mean, that's just ridiculous. Great teachers do not just give their kids bubble-in tests. The test at the end of the year, I'm happy to hear you clarify that. If it's applied to everybody, the same way, that's great. That's great. And if the validity is high, that's great. That's been the biggest problem with portfolios. As you remember in the 90s when we were all wild about these and we couldn't make them valid. Arizona had to dump its entire testing system. It's an expensive mistake to make. If it's applied to everybody, that's great. And there are surely better ways to do assessment. So Senator McCain, just to be clear, his point is, whatever fabulous assessments we want to give, you set the standard the same for everybody and you assess everybody the same way. You don't have one test over here and one over there. Instruction in the school is and should be inclusive of formative assessments that are cognizant of the test at the end of the year, but don't spend their lives worrying about it. Great instruction and great teachers don't worry about a test at the end of the year. They go right through it. They've taught the material. They're not obsessing about it.
Lisa, I saw you nodding your head before when Linda was questioning Senator McCain's commitment to early childhood education. I'd like to move to that now. How supportive is Senator McCain of early childhood?
Well, he's very supportive, and I was shaking my head on where you got the $3 billion goes away thing. As Senator McCain has said, he does freeze domestic spending, and he holds education spending where it is, which is 47% higher than it was 6 years ago. It's at a high level. The concern I think we have to have is if it were true, and I wish that it were, that preschool was resulting in this fabulous effect, then by now we should have a lot more progress in elementary, middle, and high school. Because in 1994, when we did our first state sort of add-on to Head Start, that was the first time Arizona did that, $10 million, and it's only grown since then. And I have to tell you, we don't see the kind of benefit we ought to be getting from that. Why not? Well, as somebody who is obsessed with language, and I was a linguistics major, language acquisition and laying down language tracks for kids by having them in the presence of educators who have fabulous knowledge of what it is to expand on a child's language and present language and feedback and really lay down this sort of foundational basis. That's not who we have in too many of our early childhood programs. Senator McCain is saying we absolutely have to get to the issue of quality teachers in preschool programs. The estimates are that there are a vast majority of our kids, of 4-year-olds, of high-need 4-year-olds who have access to a preschool program. The question is whether it is effective access. Are those kids ready? Are they lucky enough to be in the presence of somebody who knows how to get their language going? So Senator McCain is saying, look, we have got to talk about the quality of these programs. We do have to have an assessment of the quality of the programs. We can't be flinching away from quality assessments of preschool. And you get a lot of pushback, as you know, on whether it's okay to take a look at the quality of preschool programs, because people feel like you're going to sit kids down and horrify them with a testing situation, and that's not the case.
Linda, can we expand preschool the way you've suggested while still maintaining quality or even aiming for higher quality?
Absolutely, and let me just clarify, you asked the question of where did the cutting the $3 billion come. When Senator McCain put out his proposal for the $300 billion tax cut, he identified a number of places that would come from, and $3 billion of it was from Head Start, so that's 1% of it, but significant in the context of Head Start. The early childhood research base is really clear that high-quality preschool, and we know the elements of that kind of high-quality preschool from the work, not just Perry Preschool, but many, many others, has strong benefits and lasting benefits for students throughout school. We also know that you can't just send kids to good preschool programs and then into lousy schools. The follow-through studies found that if you do that, you may lose some of those gains down the road. You have to continue with that. But the kind of instruction that's necessary, the kind of parent involvement in education that's necessary is really clear. Obama's plan is both to expand access, because right now only about 40% of the children eligible for Head Start get access to Head Start. Only 3% of the children eligible for early Head Start get access to early Head Start. And so his plan both improves quality with a set of ways to both look at the quality of early childhood education and to leverage changes in the nature and quality of teaching, and also to expand access so that we're beginning to reduce that achievement gap. He will quadruple the number of students getting access to early Head Start. He'll increase the numbers getting access to Head Start by more than 100,000 to reach over 1 million. That will, and he'll also provide early learning challenge grants to states so that the state movement to begin to provide early childhood education is reinforced with quality levers so that it also becomes stronger. In the long run, this will do, as we just saw recently in New Jersey, when as part of their school finance funding plan, they put early childhood education in place. And if you look at the data for New Jersey now, you'll see that the achievement gap has closed more in the last few years, particularly in the early grades, particularly in early literacy, because they instituted high-quality preschool, they trained teachers, they put the resources into being sure that the nature of the programs was high quality, and they offered it to virtually all of the low-income children in the Abbott districts that needed it. Their overall achievement is going up. Their achievement gap is reducing because they're putting that resource where it's absolutely needed.
Okay,
we have to get you down to 2 minutes.
I'm going to have to ask both of you to try to keep to the 2-minute time, and if there are rejoinders, to stick to under a minute, because we have many questions left. I'd like to turn to teacher preparation. A number of big cities, including New York, are recruiting increasing numbers of new teachers from Teach for America, the New Teacher Project, and other such efforts. Some recent studies suggest we no longer have a traditional system and then a lot of alternative routes, but a very variegated system with all sorts of pathways that can be successful under certain conditions. What approaches to teacher preparation does your candidate value, and how would he support them? And we'll start with Lisa.
Senator McCain has been very clear that he is very compelled by the research that tells that countries that focus on recruitment from the highest level of their universities, so the highest performing graduates across content areas, this is who they're pulling into their education system. So as part of his plan, he's saying he'd like to incentivize states to create plans for pulling that top 25% off, that those teachers then go into preparation programs or as part of their instruction, if they're in that top tier of achievers in universities, they're also introduced to pedagogy and instruction while they're in school. In Arizona, for example, we pay for scholarships for kids who perform really well in high school. That would be a good tier of kids, perhaps, to take a look at making sure that they have some pedagogy and they have some instructional part of their coursework so that they might choose at some point to become a teacher, but be ready to go into some more training and potentially to teach. So he's very compelled that it's vitally important that we recruit extremely strong, academically focused people to begin with. What's interesting to Senator McCain, obviously Teach for America is a very compelling program. Troops to Teachers is interesting. Right now represents the single most prevalent resource for minority men into teaching, Troops to Teachers. The High Tech High in California, they have an interesting program where one of their highest performing high schools actually certifies teachers on site. I do think these alternatives are going to become mainstream, and I think that they should. And Senator McCain is saying we have to keep that door open. So what we need is a very high standard and a very low barrier to entry. Lots of ways to come in. Lots of ways for mid-career changers like the American Board for Certification of Teaching Excellence. All of these programs are monitoring themselves, monitoring their programs, monitoring the quality of the instruction with kids, and it's quite high. There's no argument that these alternative programs are not doing well by students.
Linda?
I just want to pick up on the thread of what other countries are doing, because I think that is really important. And what you see in the highest achieving countries, again, the Scandinavian countries I mentioned earlier, and Asian countries as well, is that they bring people in from the top tier of either high school or college students into undergraduate or graduate programs. They pay their way for 3 to 4 years of teacher education, which includes clinical practice in schools that are associated with the universities, what we might think of as professional development schools. They're getting all of that preparation free and with a stipend or a salary as they get in Singapore. They come into a profession that's well paid. In Singapore, teachers earn more, beginning teachers, than beginning doctors do. The doctors do catch up. They get intensive mentoring. They get 10 to 20 hours a week of professional learning time to plan and collaborate with their colleagues and get better at their craft. And they have career pathways that move forward. All of those things are part of what Senator Obama has proposed as elements of his agenda for improving the quality of teaching. He is very much in favor of recruiting academically able people. He appreciates the energy and the dedication of Teach for America recruits that come in and teach where they're needed. He also appreciates the dedication of and the ability and training of folks here at Teachers College, people at Stanford University and other places, and he appreciates the mid-career recruits coming into places like the teacher residencies in Denver and Boston and Chicago. And he's planning to expand those kinds of high-quality pathways that ensure that teachers get strong preparation. He's offered service scholarships of $25,000 for people who will come into teaching, a free ride to get prepared to teach in high-need locations and high-need schools, as well as ensuring that they get access to all of the professional learning supports throughout their career.
And should we be paying teachers for student performance gains, and in what way? Lisa?
Well, okay, I can start on that. Senator McCain this is a key part of his program. He believes that school principals should be the people in charge of both recruiting their own staff, but also evaluating their own staff, and he would like to use federal money that goes to schools, to go directly to schools and have principals be able to reward teachers primarily on the basis of student achievement. Now, they might choose to do that as in the entire school. They might choose to do it partially your own kids, partially group, but they absolutely, in his mind, have to organize themselves around student achievement. This is a difference between Senator Obama and Senator McCain. Senator Obama has said, as I understand it, you can use achievement so long as it's not over 50%. Senator McCain is saying it's got to be at least 51. That looking at what happens in the classroom and how well teachers do with gains of students, not getting to a particular bar, but the gains of the kids from where they start to where they end up. We know that we have a great capacity now to look at student gains. We also know that kids who are with teachers who are not effective and cannot move their kids a year for 3 years in a row, that child is lost. Just lost. The difference in percentiles, ranking for those kids is 50 percentile points. There's no recovering for a child that gets that kind of a sequence. And if it weren't happening so often, it wouldn't be so tragic. But we have so many constraints and around being able to pay teachers for their own performance, mostly in the bargained agreements, that there's no way to do it right now. Senator McCain is saying, look, with federal money, that money is going to be used for that kind of academic gain and ought to be.
Linda?
Well, there's no percentage level, but I do think there are big differences between these plans. What Barack Obama has proposed is that we need to recognize and reward excellence in teaching as part of a career ladder, as part of a career development program that ensures that beginning teachers get strong mentoring on their way into the profession from expert mentors, and I'll come back to the selection of those expert mentors, who can give them that intensive help, make a real decision at tenure, continue with ongoing professional learning and opportunities for teachers to grow, and give teachers opportunities to take on roles as mentors, as coaches, to be leaders in high-need schools. Those teachers need to demonstrate excellence in the classroom and evidence of contributions to student learning and achievement. There are a lot of districts and states even that have built these kind of career ladders, which have lasted much longer than many of the merit pay plans that have come and gone over more than 80 years since the beginning of the century. Florida's was just repealed lately, Jeb Bush's merit pay plan, which tied teachers' pay directly to student test scores. Didn't last very long. But these career ladder programs in places like Arizona's career ladder, New Mexico, Denver, Montana, Minnesota, are creating a way by which actually teachers are developing expertise, sharing that expertise with their colleagues. In the end of the day, everyone is better educated. All teachers are better supported because it really sees this as part of the development of the career over time, taking account of all of the ways in which teachers make contributions to their students' learning.
So, Lisa, you're dying
if we
to
could
get
stay
in
on
there.
this for just a minute. First of all, I'm sorry to say that Arizona's career ladder program has not had a profound effect on achievement. Secondly, Florida, for that short period of time when they did have focus on achievement, had a bigger close in their gap, their achievement gap, while they were improving than almost anybody else in the country. So it was a pretty effective policy if you just look at what happened because of the policy. So these are very different. The other issue is, and I think this is critically important, Senator Obama is saying, look, basically the union has to agree with whatever it is. You've got Michelle Ray right now in Washington, D.C. Senator McCain is absolutely backing what she's trying to do. She's saying, look, teachers, let's look at two ways to do this. Either go with the old union contract or go with the new one and pay you more, but let me judge you on the basis of achievement. Let your principal judge you on the basis of achievement. Union won't even bring it up for a vote. I mean, the fact of the matter is, Linda, it all sounds so great and fabulous when you say it, but then why are we so constrained and why are we not making progress? The fact of the matter is, in those places where they have been focused, it's making differences for kids.
Well, let me talk a little bit about both Florida and Arizona. There have been a whole little set of studies done of the districts in Arizona that have stepped up and developed these kinds of career ladder programs. And interestingly, they have shown gains in student achievement in comparison to the gains that other districts have made. In Florida, there are about 55 different reforms that were going on at the same time. And so you can't really isolate any one thing. But the fact of the matter about the merit pay plan was that it was not only deeply unpopular with some teachers who didn't, even the ones who received the bonuses, felt that they were unearned. They felt that it was creating a competition among teachers instead of teachers working collegially with one another and teamwork to move the school forward, that it was causing this competition. It was disadvantaging teachers who took on the neediest students. There were a lot of concerns, but also school boards had problems with it and parents had problems with it. So when it was finally repealed, it was because it had been roundly believed to be unsuccessful by virtually all the parties involved.
Except for the kids who got better.
I don't think there's any evidence about that.
Let's stay on the issue of competition and talk briefly about charters and choice. Is there daylight between the two candidates on charters?
Yes.
What is that?
First of all, in public charters, Senator McCain would do a couple of things. Absolutely lift any caps on the ability for states. He can't enact that, but he would support states doing away with caps. Senator Obama, when he came out and said he'd increase the amount of money that the Fed spend on these stimulus funds, also said, very notably, and make sure that those schools and those states put in place the kinds of controls that we want so that we can say what's an effective school. Senator McCain does not want to get into the business of saying to states what an effective charter school program is. Senator Obama has said only a nonprofit can be a public charter school, apparently. Senator McCain is saying only a school that is doing well by kids can be a public charter school. They can organize themselves in whichever way they want to. But the bottom line is this better for kids? Are they getting academic gains? I can stop there.
I think that there's some agreement that investment in public school charters is one way to improve the system. And Obama has proposed to expand both funding for public school charters and accountability. He wants to see that failing charters are closed while successful charters are enabled to move forward. He also has proposed a $200 million school innovation fund to support the kind of new schools in the public districts that are being created, as right here in New York City, that are redesigning schools, starting new school models that are more successful as well. So he sees a number of ways to make the investments in a strong public school sector where choice builds the supply of schools worth choosing. Because choice isn't worth very much if all it does is move around the deck chairs on the Titanic. Very good schools are already full. They don't have a lot of vacancies. We have to build the supply of those schools. So I think that's a place where you're going to see a lot more activity from Obama. He is opposed to vouchers. He believes they drain money from the public schools. Senator McCain has been in favor of vouchers and has proposed to give additional money to the DC voucher program, despite the fact that a recent IES study found that it did add nothing to achievement for the students who participated in it. Same findings as we've had in Milwaukee a couple of times.
Do you read the evidence the same way?
I did not. I believe the evidence is absolutely clear that there are achievement gains in those schools and that the parents are much more highly satisfied with those schools, feel they're safer, feel that their kids are happier there, and that the environment is one that they'd like to choose for their child. It's just deeply disingenuous, I think, for Senator Obama to send his own children to private school, to have been the recipient of a scholarship for private school, and then to lecture people on the fact that going to a private school drains money from the public schools. I think that's just silly. So Senator McCain, although it's a very small portion of his plan, he does believe in a desperate situation like DC, where kids are failing to learn to read, yeah, if parents want an option, that's probably a good idea.
As Linda thinks of her rejoinder, now is the time to turn in your questions. People will be coming around. Linda?
Yeah. Well, the theory that people have around vouchers is that either the competition will improve schools writ large, and or they will improve the achievement of the individual students who get them. The IES study was very clear. It did say that parents felt better about their schools, but it did not find an achievement gain for the kids who got the vouchers. And DC public schools, in these years of having the vouchers, also have not improved. Same thing was found in 2 studies in Milwaukee, that neither did the individual students improve their achievement, nor did the Milwaukee public schools, because it has all this competition now with both charters and vouchers, improve its achievement over the years since 2000. So I think that's a question of what you think is a useful investment of the public's dollars to get the kind of growth that we want. Senator Obama, of course, attended both public and private schools, but he didn't ask for the taxpayers to pay for that. And I think that's where the question about choice is important. What we found in the voucher programs is quite often a lot of the private schools don't really want high-need kids with poor attendance records and low test scores. They don't want to participate in the voucher. For education to get better for those children, they need high-quality public schools that are going to ensure that, and those could be within the traditional district or the charter system, but they have to be schools worth choosing.
You're going to have
data. We're just going to have to send you guys out to go read the data, Linda. It's just not right.
And
There's lots of groups who have looked at these, and the definitive studies say they make a difference. And those countries that have more than 50% private schools also have better public schools.
If you guys want to give me a list of the studies you want people to read, I'll be happy to put them up on our web.
You're a school, for God's sakes. You know where these studies are.
Well, we have lots of studies that
I want you
give
to
different
read
results.
the study that was put out by the Institute for Educational Sciences in about June of this year, in early summer.
Opposed to choice.
Okay,
The
I'm
Institute of
going to...
Educational Sciences is the federal government.
Yeah. We are going to give you guys a chance to go at each other in a minute. I would not be true to my own education here at Teachers College if I didn't turn to the subject of money. My field here was school finance. And I have to ask you about money. Number one, we don't have any. We're at a $1 trillion deficit almost. State and local governments are in terrible shape and will be seeing decreases in property tax and other revenues. How are we going to support schools in general? How are we going to do the things that your candidates propose? What are we going to do about special ed, which has been underfunded for so many years? So I'm throwing that all into one question with just one more twist, because here we are in an institution of higher education. We're also worried about student loans and access to college. So get into it, Linda.
You and all of it in 2 minutes.
Right.
You want me to start?
Please.
Okay. Well, let me say a couple things about that. In the last debate, Bob Schieffer made a statement that the U.S. spends more on education than any other country. That is actually true in higher education, and we have a system that is the envy of the world. It is not true in K-12 education or in pre-K education. As a percentage of GDP, we're probably about 13th in the world in K-12, and we're 25th in the amount of additional money we've spent over the last 5 years in terms of increases. So we're falling behind in the investment race that's going on around the world. So we're going to have to find some money for some investments. We have to be careful about wasteful spending. Let me say a few words about wasteful spending versus investment. I think those are two very different things. We lose about $300 billion a year because of the effects of dropouts. Those are costs for lost wages and taxes, for incarceration, for health care, and a variety of other things. If we could cut the dropout rate in half, and again, the investments in early childhood, in teaching, in school redesign that Barack is proposing could do that, we would save $150 billion. His total plan for pre-K and K-12 education is about $29 billion. We're about to spend $2.25 trillion, I just saw, on the financial bailout. Why, by the time it's all added up, that's the most current estimate that was in the newspaper yesterday. We're talking about a tiny percentage of that, as less than 1%, to make the kind of investment that's going to be needed to turn around the wasteful spending that we engage in because we're not educating kids well early on. The most inmates are high school dropouts. Prison populations have gone up by 300%. We're spending more of the money that we should be spending on health care and Social Security in the prison system. And you have states saying that they predict prison beds 10 years out from third grade reading scores. We'll spend $35,000 on somebody in a cell, but not $10,000 on them to be sure they have a highly qualified teacher in second grade to ensure that they're able to read. So when we think about spending, we have to think about it in terms of investment.
Lisa?
You know, there's just not one single credible study right now that says what we really need to do in the United States is spend more money. It would be easy to say that's what it is, but the United States in real dollars has quadrupled our funding since 1968, real current dollars. And at the same time, we've had achievement just absolutely flat, slightly negative. I know that's no fun to hear because it's always more fun to say, well, you know, what we really need to do is just make an investment. That's not what's getting us where we want to go. It doesn't mean we couldn't use more money. It doesn't mean we shouldn't spend more money. We are the highest spending country on administration and about the lowest on teacher salary. The thing is upside down. It's ridiculous. So there are plenty of ways to reorganize the way that we are spending our money. But look at the Center for Education and the Economy. Mark Tucker's group put out a great study comparing us to what was going on in the world and basically just said that's ridiculous. That is not an argument. If money were the answer, New Jersey, D.C., they ought to be off the charts. And they're not. They're spending much more money. They spend twice what we do in Arizona. And Arizona probably needs to kick up its investment. But I think this is an extremely easy thing to continue to say. We've just got to make an investment. And what Senator McCain wants us to do is to do the kind of work the Education Equality Project is asking us to do. Sit down and say why, with all the resources that we have. Let's make some tough decisions. Are we in our own way? Do we have barriers that are keeping us from having the best teacher in the most needy classrooms? Why is this not happening in the presence of the resources that we do have?
So I'm going to let you guys continue this conversation for 10 minutes on this or on anything else you want to talk about.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about New Jersey and D.C. I think D.C. is a good example of wasteful spending, and it's what happens when Congress tries to run a school district. There's been a whole history about that. But New Jersey is a place that for years and years spent a lot of money but didn't deal with the inequalities in its state. And we have a very unequal school system, whereas most countries spend money equally on all schools, and they might add a little bit more in schools that serve high-need kids. We spend much more on the education of our wealthy students than we do on the education of our poor students. In most states, there's a 3 or 4 to 1 ratio between the highest spending districts and the lowest spending districts. So we have places in New York as well as in California, even more there because funding is less, where the paint is peeling, where there aren't libraries, where there aren't computers, where kids don't have qualified teachers. Half the staff or more is first-year teachers. You can't actually make a lift. That was true in the urban districts in New Jersey for a long time. And finally, they were forced by the court to put funding into those districts. They were strategic about how they spent the money. And I do agree with you, Lisa, that we have to be strategic. We can't just throw money at the problem. You have to throw it in the right place. They put that money into early childhood education. They put it into improving the quality of teaching in those districts, literacy coaches, a variety of things. They're in the top-tier states in achievement in this country, far above where Arizona is. They're always in the top 10, usually in the top 5. And their achievement gap has begun to narrow significantly over the period of time since they made those very strategic investments. We have study after study that shows that if you make investments carefully in high-quality ways on the right things, you do get results. You do get achievement gains. I think we have to be smart about how we spend our money.
Lisa.
Well, of course we have to be smart about how we spend our money, but talking about the differential between the amount of money that gets spent on a personal level, and not speaking for Senator McCain now, that's a huge issue with me and always has been. And in Arizona, when we went through a school finance lawsuit, when I had my job, I actually turned the state's position around because I thought it was wrong to try to argue that poor students have as much access as wealthy do to money. They don't. That's the truth. And Senator McCain was one of very few Republican leaders who didn't call me and tell me to stop it. The fact of the matter is, there are differences, Linda, but you can't just ignore that in the places where kids are failing, that it's money, or that they don't have the resources, and make that argument that that's what it is. That's not it, all right? That's not it. So better teaching, that's an issue. Why don't we have better teaching, and why don't teachers get paid? They don't get paid more because we've got contracts that say, here's where you're going to start, all of you in this district. Here's where you're going to end up, all of you, and you're going to get a step and a bump and a step and a bump, and you're going to stay in the classroom even if you're not doing a super jiffy job of teaching. There's not much I can do about that. We all know this. And so it's time to confront that. It is time to confront that. And that is what Senator McCain is saying. Let's get the best possible young people, old people, whoever, in our classrooms. Let's get development to principals, get development dollars to principals so they can do professional development that is relevant to the needs of their school. Let's give the kids in Title I immediate access to tutoring. Let's not go around labeling schools failing or almost failing or schools we wish were a little bit better. Let's get that money to the kids for intervention immediately. Those are the kinds of things that will make a difference. What I always want to know is, what is the money for? You say it's strategic, we're going to add more, we're going to be strategic. Fine. For what?
Oh, thank you for asking that question.
Not a problem.
I appreciate it. We're talking about a $10 billion investment in early childhood education, again, to expand the number of kids who get access, low-income children who get access to the programs that exist for which they're not now able to get slots.
Will increase quality by?
Will increase quality with both looking at the ways in which teachers are prepared and the programs are structured in those environments, and evaluating the way in which the programs are designed. There's a whole set of design features that are articulated.
Do you evaluate the actual program? Do you test the kids that are in that preschool, or do you take a look at how the teachers do?
I think there are a lot of ways to look at how kids are doing in preschool programs other than sitting them down to try to take a test. And there's a whole conversation about that in the early childhood community, which you're well familiar with. No, I think there are ways to see how students are achieving. There are observation protocols. There are ways to look at how kids are doing. There are also ways to look at the long-term outcomes of those programs. I think you have to do both. You have to look both in the moment, and you have to look, as many studies have, at how kids progress in school over time. We know that those who get the kind of quality they need develop language. You can evaluate, for example, kids' language acquisition by using tools that have them speak in ways that you can record it validly and reliably without asking them to sit down and try to take tests that are not developmentally appropriate. So that was the first part of your answer to your question about investment, is the early childhood investments. 300,000 more kids. Senator McCain has talked about investing in early childhood, $200,000 per state if it's available.
He's talking about centers of excellence, as you know, not for tuition. He's talking about making sure that we train people who are in these situations to understand what it looks like when a preschool program is a quality program, to find a way to assess. There's nobody that I know, Linda, who sits down with a child who's a 4-year-old across a table and hands them a test and says, sweat this out or throw up or, be nervous. I mean, I've been given a bunch of Peabody vocabulary tests for my entire life. These things are just not onerous, but you have to measure. As you said, yeah, you can. You can do it through observation, but you have to do it, and we're not doing it right now. That's what that $200,000 for those centers is for.
So what it won't do is expand access to the kids who don't have access now, and there's no money in your plan to do that. So we will still we have huge poverty, and we'll still have a lot of kids coming to school who have not had any early childhood education.
As will be true after you add another $10 billion. You will still have kids who don't have access.
We will be very close to having universal access to preschool between the state challenge grants and the federal piece. I haven't moved on to point 2, but I'd love to, since you gave me that opportunity, to say what we're going to invest in strategically, because the second most important thing is the quality of teachers. I know Susan has to move on to the audience questions. And those kinds of investments need to bring money in for recruiting the best and the brightest. And you have to underwrite preparation so that people don't have to go into debt for a career that they're gonna that doesn't pay enough to allow them to pay off that debt later on. You need to distribute teachers more equitably.
How about just expand Teach for America that right now is doing this work? Why don't you expand that program, dedicate dollars to that, like Senator McCain is doing? That's a proven program.
Is that what he's planning to spend money? So what are you taking money away from in order to do that with the spending freeze?
It's part in Title II that he would use part of that professional development dollars for those teachers, for bringing in those teachers.
Well, if you did that, you'd have people coming in, and for all the great things that Teach for America candidates do, they're making a 2-year commitment.
No, but they stay, as you know.
Most of the evidence suggests that most of them stay no more than 2 or 3 years, but
they
we
stay
have to build
at the rate
a
of
long-term
30%, and most
teaching.
teachers stay at the rate of 40%. There's a 10% differential, Linda, between
Let's
3 to 5 year teachers.
Statistics again. 30% of teachers leave within 5 years. That's the federal numbers from the Baccalaureate and Beyond survey and the SAS surveys and others. Of those, 49% of those who come in without training leave within that period of time. 19% of those who come in fully trained leave in that period of time. So there's a big difference in how long prepared teachers stay in the profession. And
these guys also go out, as you know. They are the founders of a number of public charter schools, innovative ideas. Michelle Ray in D.C., a very innovative leader who comes out of that system because it is very achievement-oriented as a group. Their instruction in how to teach is about instruction, about what a successful school looks like. So those are, and it's not just Teach for America, there's a number of those programs that Senator McCain, as you know, is offering to support.
Yeah,
Did you need us for something?
I do need you. Okay. I'm fascinated by what you're doing, but we do have some questions from the audience.
Let me just say, I don't think that builds you a profession, and that's what Senator Obama has promised to do.
Why is a TFA teacher not a teacher? Why is a TFA teacher not part of the profession? Of course they are.
Last sentence.
Last sentence is you need 3 million people, not a few thousand, who come in, many of whom stay for a career and become highly expert and become the glue that holds schools together, enables schools to move forward, build curriculum, figure out how to teach all kids well, and mentor those beginning teachers who do come in. And if you don't have that entire profession doing that work together, using a knowledge base and building it in some kind of systematic way, you will never get to the kind of achievement outcomes that we see in these other countries that do invest in teaching as a profession.
So let me just pick up on a question I tried to ask before about higher education. How are we going to preserve access to higher education, asks one of our audience members, given the recent financial turmoil and reports that student loans are becoming harder to get? Lisa?
Senator McCain's plan, a couple of things. First of all, one of the things he says about high school is that he wants to make sure there's already a connection made around the junior year and certainly by the senior year between a student and what their post-secondary work is. So either they are already being connected into high-level vocational training for life-sustaining skills work, if that's where they're headed. They're already engaged with a community college or a university. As you know, there are a number of high schools now, highly successful projects that have college work in the high school. And kids can already collect credits while they're in high school and reduce the cost, but most importantly, well, that sometimes is most important, but also decrease this transition, this fall off between high school and the college, make that a much more seamless transition because kids are already hooked in. If they're choosing to go to the military, they're already making that decision and they're already doing preparatory work there. That high school can no longer be something that happens in isolation and then maybe you go on, you know, when you say to kids, are they gonna go on? You just in and you're going and you connect those and that makes it far less expensive to be in universities. The other thing he would do is to take all of the grant programs, and unfortunately we just had the Congress add 50 new categories, I think, to higher ed granting programs, and take, you've all had the privilege of filling out the FAFSA, make that a much cleaner project, and the estimates are, and I heard Melody say it again today, we could add $3 billion in what's available by simply streamlining this project, and Senator McCain is saying all of these grant programs have got to be under one umbrella so that they're easy for families, they're accessible, there's transparent information about schools, and that would create a much greater pool of money that's available for them.
Linda?
So Senator Obama has made some substantial commitments around financial aid for students. He has worked with the Congress to raise the amount of the Pell Grant so that it more closely approximates what people actually have to pay. Back in the 70s, the Pell Grant was like 3/4 of the cost of an education. It's fallen to about 1/3. And so he's worked to get the legislation in place to make it continue to progress towards a greater share. He's also proposed a $4,000 a year tax credit, refundable, advanceable, for all young people to go to college. That will pay about 2/3 of the cost of college at a public college or university, and will enable virtually all young people who are qualified, have made the grades, and are ready to advance, be able to go to college. This is, again, really important for our future economy because college graduates now earn 3 times as much as high school dropouts, although 30% of our kids drop out, twice as much as high school graduates. Those wages and that productivity, the ability to take our high-tech jobs, which now we can't even fill with our own graduates because we're not producing enough highly educated people, is estimated to grow the economy by anywhere from about 4 to about 15%. In long-term economic growth. We're falling behind in that. We've got to make it possible for the young people who are preparing to go to college to go there. He's also authored the DREAM Act in Illinois, which is to enable young people who are immigrants to get access to financial aid. And that's going to be very important as well, so that the human capital we have, the talent that we have in this country is put to the development of the kind of skills we need to run a knowledge-based economy.
So I have a number of questions here that I'm going to combine. Some are about the arts and some are about civics education. In both cases, people think they're being neglected under a No Child Left Behind climate of focus on literacy and numeracy. Lisa, do you want to take
Well,
that one?
and where they are, it's just a shame, because by focusing on the arts in particular, you get a huge academic benefit. There's a great video, and I'm trying to remember whose it is. I don't think it's Uncommon Schools, although I do like the way they present their program as well. But there's a video out about, it's called Flunked, but it's about schools that are making it. It sounds sort of pessimistic tone for a pretty optimistic film. Talks about schools that organize themselves around particular principles. And one of the things we know about really effective schools is that they are mission focused, they are absolutely committed to the kids, and many of those schools are organized around the arts. A woman in Arizona, Karen Butterfield, was one of the first public charter schools. She was Teacher of the Year, and she started a public high school, a charter high school for kids that had dropped out of the Flagstaff area schools. And one of the things she said is that it was just critically important for them to focus on the arts, because most of these kids had strengths in this area and they just were being bored to death. And they went into the public charter school organized around the arts, and they were just absolutely fantastic. I think it is demonstrative of the fact that these schools themselves need to have mission focus. And No Child Left Behind never said, and nobody intended for it to be a matter of don't teach anything but math and science, or don't teach anything but math and reading. Science kind of took short shift too. But that was the response. And I think we have to look at ourselves for that. Why do we respond that way? How come we don't know that the best way to improve schools is to come out and organize around a mission, and organize perhaps around the arts, organize around perhaps math and science, organize around something, but pull yourselves together as a school community, have a mission focus, and go for it. It can be a lot of different things. That's the question. It's too simplistic to try to blame it on the fact that we wanted to know if we were doing well in math and in reading. Of course we need to know that. But the best way to get there is in these more creative, more mission-focused schools. They're phenomenal teaching communities, usually started by groups of teachers or reorganized by groups of teachers. So it's hugely lamentable. It's the wrong answer, and hopefully more people will go out and take a look at these really highly successful schools and why they are.
Do you agree?
That we ought to look at highly successful schools for sure, and we really need to have a rich, full curriculum. It's one of the things that Obama talks about quite a lot, that we need to have kids engaged in science and history and the arts, and that's got to be part of it. There is, again, a funding issue for some of the low-income schools in this country. In California, poor schools don't offer the arts because they simply can't afford to have art teachers. And only affluent schools have music and art and libraries of any kind in California at this point. So we do have to worry about how we're going to leverage the changes in that system that are necessary if we really want to have that kind of rich curriculum available everywhere. The other piece that you asked about was sort of citizenship and character education, and I want to deal with that as well. Senator Obama has a very, very strong commitment to the notion of service, that we do our best when we are working on behalf of one another. And so his service scholarships for entering not only teaching, but public service, which will allow kids to get educated in college. The tuition tax credit asks for 100 hours of community service. He is supportive of and intending to provide resources for community service in high schools so that very early on, kids get the opportunity to learn how satisfying it is to do things for one's colleagues, for one's community, to make that commitment to be part of a democratic community and to give in that way throughout their lives. And I think that's just hugely important for the future of the democracy.
Has failure to address educationally relevant health disparities been a missing link in national school reform efforts to close the achievement gap? Linda?
Educationally relevant health disparities, absolutely. I mean, we know that fewer and fewer people have health care. Many, many children don't have health care. There's a lot of evidence that it affects achievement, it affects absenteeism and attendance. So many children have asthma now, particularly in urban environments, that the little nebulizers are lined up in the nurse's office quite often. The kind of health care you need, rather than having to take that kid to the emergency room when they can't breathe, you need the kind of preventive health care that allows them to be in school, be treated appropriately. superintendent of Prince George's County, John Dacey, was describing when I was with him recently, a child who lives in view of the White House and the Capitol, who died the week before from a cavity that had gone untreated because there was no dental care. So the critical importance of bringing a healthcare system to bear, and as you know, Obama proposes a healthcare reform that will ensure that all children have healthcare services, is absolutely part of the need to wrap kids in a way that they can be successful in school. It's not an excuse to say that children deserve health care. It's part of who we are as Americans to ensure that that occurs.
Lisa?
No, I think that's right. I think it isn't an excuse. It's part of successful schools where kids are coming to school without that kind of health care. Successful schools will go out and make sure that they've got it. One of the things in early child care we need to do is make sure that we're not preventing that. I had the opportunity to oversee a lot of Head Start programs in Maricopa County, and one of the things that happens is there are so many constraints on certain programs and whether they can cooperate with other programs that some of those programs are flat out prevented from working with the county health system because they're a federal program, which is absolutely ridiculous. And Senator McCain talks about that in his preschool plan. So sometimes what we do is we prevent schools because of their funding streams from going out and accessing health care, because you've got county health care, state health care programs, the federal health care dollars, and oftentimes you can't sort of entwine those together. So it is critically important for those schools that need to access these programs that they can bring them onto their schools. There's some really great models for it, and we just have to make sure we allow that to happen.
Does your candidate support the development and implementation of national standards and assessments? Linda?
I think that what Senator Obama has really articulated is how important it is for us to have high-quality standards. And he has said he wants to work with the nation's governors to raise the quality of our standards, to make sure that they, in fact, represent 21st century skills that are the kind that we need to organize all of our schooling effort around. And we need to then improve the quality of the assessments so that they're really measuring those skills. That's probably going to be done in a partnership between states and the federal government who are going to figure out together how to move this forward. We have some states already that have very, very high standards and strong curriculum and assessment systems. We have others that do not. And part of the challenge is going to be how do you move the whole system to resemble the best that's available and not have a pull on the system to lower standards. Now, one of the things that did happen with No Child Left Behind, because of the requirement that 100% of students be proficient in a certain period of time, is that the states that had defined proficiency at a very high level reduced their standards in order to meet the expectations of the law. And it's one of the sort of flaws in the design of the law that needs to be remedied. We need to figure out how to support all schools in the quest for higher standards. I think we should look again at how some other nations organize their standards and assessments to figure out how we do that well.
Lisa?
Senator McCain has said he's absolutely in favor of states maintaining these standards, but he's also in favor of the voluntary efforts that are going on. We'd be supportive of those. Right now, the American Diploma Project, Project Achieve, National Governors Association, and the Council of Chief State School Officers, 33 states are engaged in trying to not only get their standards together, but benchmark them internationally against the highest performing nations, and also making sure, as I think they've got to, that they do incorporate 21st century skills, however you define those. But clearly we haven't focused enough on technology, on innovative instruction. If you haven't read Disrupting Class by Clayton Christensen yet, I think that's a very compelling idea about what's going to happen with schools, making sure that we don't inadvertently, through our standards movement, shut down a lot of what could be very innovative ways to learn. So he's absolutely supportive of that going on, and the best dialogue will probably happen among those 33 states, and so hopefully all 50 will join in, and they'll do it voluntarily. Our assessments, are written at the state level by only about 5 different testing companies, and I always make the joke that in fact the difference between them has more to do with a map on the front page than it does between the items. But the standards themselves nationwide are still quite low in comparison to what the rest of the world is asking their kids to know.
Let me pick up on what you said about technology and ask you, Linda, how important that is to the future of American education, and what kind of investments do we need to make in it?
It's hugely important. Senator Obama has proposed $500 million in investments to both create more connectivity and accessibility in low-income schools. There's still a lot of schools out there that are not wired to be able to get access to high-speed internet, that don't have computers for most of the children there, and we can't expect them to develop these skills. We also need to infuse it in the way we teach, so that means we have to help teachers learn how to use technology in new ways. We need to be able to develop the kind of courseware that makes distance learning and adjunct supports available to kids. Our schools, for the most part, still look in a lot of respects like schools did in 1950. Other countries are moving on ahead, and I think we really have to be clear that this is part of the future. When I was in Singapore recently, very poor country, 80% of the kids live in public housing, but on every desk there was a laptop, and teachers were using the computers in the way that they instructed. Kids would do an essay and be able to evaluate each other's, from their laptop on their desk and give each other feedback, and she could pull up the one she wanted to identify in the front of the room and so on. They're making enormous investments in this in other countries. We really do need to get on that bus.
So I'm going to turn to a self-interested subject, and that's research. One of the historic federal roles has been to support research. How would your candidate like to see research organized and supported by the federal government?
Susan, I would recommend a website called Science Debate 2008 that talks both candidates about their sort of science strategies, and it was in this place that Senator McCain chose to talk about his focus on research, on primarily the science of science itself, education, issues of STEM, issues of basic research. And one of the things that he says is we've got to get out of this process of doing sort of earmarked research projects and get to a place where we can absolutely have national areas of focus, which we must have. He's proposing putting somebody in the White House whose brief is basic research in the United States, and primarily in the area of science and technology, but also are we in those areas where we're innovating, and he includes education K-12 in there. When we're innovating in education, are we doing it based on scientifically sound research? So it's a huge issue for him.
Do you have any specific changes to propose to the Institute of Education Sciences, or is it pretty satisfactory as far as the senator is concerned?
Well, I mean, it's ever satisfactory. I thought you were talking about AERI, the couple questions back there, Linda. No, I think the efforts there have been noteworthy over the past few years to try to tie instruction to scientifically based research, to really hold our feet to the fire on whether what we're doing is having an effect on student achievement gains. So I do think they've tried to put a better focus on there. I think there's always room for improvement there, and so as Senator McCain has said, he'd like to make that more of a focus of ours.
Linda?
Well, the Obama campaign has really talked about how to ratchet up substantially both the amount and quality of educational research so that we're making decisions based on what works. And he proposes also a panel of education researchers, practitioners, business people, and others who will help us think about how to scale what works up so that we can take advantage of not only what we learn about teaching strategies that work, schooling strategies that work, and try to disseminate that information, but also think about what have we learned about how do you make the kinds of changes at scale that would allow what happens in one place to travel to many others. How do you think about the governance changes? How do you think about the networking that's needed? He looks for, in doubling the research budget, more research on learning, learning for special needs students and English language learners, as well as learning in general, so that we begin to tackle some of the issues that we really have in enabling all kids to meet standards. research about how to develop more of the D in the R&D, to develop the kinds of curriculum and assessments that will be productive for the full range of learners in our schools, looking in the content areas for how we're going to teach much more challenging content. We talked about the standards a little while ago. Our standards tend to be a mile wide and an inch deep. Other people organize their standards around a smaller number of constructs taught deeply. How do we do that? We need to really look at that and then develop the kind of tools that will help the field move schools forward.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a final question and let you use that as a lead into your closing statements. And before we do that, let me thank you so much for this incredibly entertaining and informative session. So Lisa, who would you like to be Secretary of Education in a McCain campaign? And if not, who should be, and what should be the main priorities of that secretary?
Anybody that John McCain picks is who I would like to see as Secretary of Education. I think it's going to be critically important, quite frankly, for the country to focus on things like, as the Senator has said, the Education Equality Project, and really getting into some of the urban districts that are making huge changes in the way they do business. New York is one, since we're here. New Orleans is another, where they suspended all of their old collective bargaining agreements in the restructuring district that Paul Vallis is running because it was urgent. And they literally, their schools blew away. I mean, they had to create something. And the way that they're doing that is new school districts is creating entirely new ways to envision their job. So their job isn't to create everything and run it. It's to invite in educators to start a school, to run a school, to think about it entirely differently. I think that's going to be the job of the next president, is to be extremely serious about inviting an entirely new way to do business, about bringing down barriers that are preventing us from getting this done right now, and we know that they're there, and with a pretty laser-like focus on whether it's good for kids. And it will offend traditional systems. It has to. Because if it wasn't going to offend anybody, we would have done it already. So Senator McCain is notably somebody who works across the aisle. I think this issue is no longer, if it ever was, sort of Republican and Democrat. It really has to do with those who believe that the instruction we're going to give kids is all we have to organize around. And all of the other constraints around adult organizations, around teachers' unions, around finance, which offends people, around everything that we've ever done for public education. The question now has to be, how do we focus on kids? Senator McCain says on his website that he envisions a public education system where the resources we supply for children literally follow those kids into the school that works for them. And that school gets those resources. In a very simple sort of philosophical model. It's all about that child. And so whoever, all of the people who are working with Senator McCain all over the country are people who believe that that organizing principle of what's the right thing for the child ought to be what drives us.
Thank you. Linda, would you like to be Secretary of Education in an Obama administration?
We have a very long process to get to an election, and there are going to be a lot of great candidates for Secretary of Education, and I know the Senator will pick the right person, and in that person will have certain things in mind because the Senator is very clear about where he wants to go. I think we'll see that priority placed on building a real system that ensures that all kids get access to high-quality education. Right now we have an adhocracy. We have a patchwork quilt all across the country. Things are haphazard about how people come into teaching and get prepared and get supported, about which kids get access to what kinds of services and opportunities. We don't have the capacity to ensure that everyone gets what is really the new civil right, access to a high-quality education. So the priorities are going to be on making the investments I've talked about, all the way through a pathway to success from early childhood education through K-12 schools that have great teachers and schools organized for success, focused on the kind of problem-solving and inquiry skills that kids need, and higher education support so that every child who has done the work and is qualified to go to college can go to college and can fuel our system of our whole democracy, really. We need somebody who's going to look at what works, again, in a systematic way. How do we scale it up? How do we translate that across districts? That is going to require equalization of resources. It is going to require investments. When people say, particularly rich people, that money doesn't matter, I don't see them trying to give it up. I see that the superintendent of Scarsdale is here. Mike McGill is out there somewhere. I know that that high-quality school district in Scarsdale is because he not only is strategic in the use of his funds, but he has the resources to build that quality of system. We can't have a two-tier system anymore, where in these concentrated apartheid schools where African American and Latino kids are concentrated, the resources are simply not there to ensure that they have a teacher who knows how to teach them to read, who knows how to teach them to write, how to teach them mathematics, to support the needs of English language learners and special needs learners. And that means we're going to just have to make this kind of very systemic investment in the quality of personnel in our schools and in giving them the kind of schools in which they can teach well.
Thank you. I want to thank Education Week for sponsoring this. I want to thank the audience for its wonderful attention and politeness. And I want to say good evening to all our webcast viewers, especially hi to the TC alumni. Thank you both very much.